Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're here because you want to get smart, fast on topics that matter without getting bogged down in, endless details.
Exactly. And we take the sources you're curious about and really pull out the key insights, the stuff that clicks.
Today we're tackling something pretty fascinating. Biblical prophecy and how it supposedly lines up with history. This is all based on a set of sources you shared with us.
Right. So we're going to explore some specific predictions from the Bible and look at the arguments for their fulfillment over the centuries.
The sources get into the nature of these prophecies, specific historical events, and the reasoning, the connections being made. So our mission really is to unpack all that, to get into the nuts and bolts of what these sources claim about these prophecies and their alleged fulfillment.
And by the end, you should have a much clearer picture of these arguments.
Yeah, and you can draw your own conclusions about, what might explain these apparent alignments.
Okay, so where should we start?
Let's dive right in, maybe with a prophecy about the Bible itself. The sources mention that.
Yes. That's a foundational one. The claim is that the Bible actually predicted its own survival and its global spread.
Like in Isaiah, the grass withers, the flower fades.
But the word of our God will stand forever.
Exactly.
And you have to think about the context back then. I mean, when that was written.
It's striking, yeah. The people holding on to these texts, a small group, often persecuted.
Right, and huge empires were actively trying to wipe them out.
It would seem incredibly unlikely that their writings would survive millennia, let alone spread worldwide.
Makes you think about how ideas last, doesn't it?
It really does. And the sources make a point that very few ancient texts from that era have anything like the Bible's staying power or reach.
So the argument is it kind of defied the odds.
Pretty much. It became the most translated, sold, distributed book ever. Its journey is, remarkable.
Hard to wrap your head around it sometimes. Starting so long ago, before my country even existed. And despite periods where it nearly vanished, it achieved this global status.
Okay, so that's the book itself. What about prophecies in the book? Babylon.
Yes, let's turn to Babylon. The sources talk about prophecies regarding its destruction from Isaiah, maybe 8th century BCE, and Jeremiah later, 6th century BCE.
What's interesting there is the timing, right? Isaiah writing.
When Assyria was the big power, not Babylon yet.
Exactly. So he's predicting the fall of a city that hadn't even hit its peak.
And Jeremiah writes later, when Babylon is dominant during the Jewish exile there.
And they both predicted not just a fall, but total ruin.
Utter and permanent ruin. Yeah, never to be inhabited again. That's the specific claim the sources highlight.
Not just a decline, but desolation.
Right. And historically, Babylon was conquered by Cyrus the Great of Persia, 539 BCE.
And later attempts to revive it.
They basically failed. Alexander the Great had plans, centuries later, but nothing stuck. Saddam Hussein more recently.
Still didn't become a major city again.
Nope. The ruins in Iraq today are still largely deserted, just as, the argument goes, was predicted.
Okay, that's quite something. Now, what about predicting a specific person? Cyrus.
Yes. The Cyrus prophecy in Isaiah. Written around 700 BCE, supposedly.
This one feels incredibly specific, naming him over 100 years before he was even born.
That's the claim. Isaiah says, "He is my shepherd," saying of Jerusalem, "You shall be built, and of the temple your foundation shall be laid."
And then it names him, "Thus says the Lord to his anointed," to Cyrus.
It's remarkably direct, isn't it? The sources emphasize this point, naming him so far in advance.
And historically, what happened?
Well, Cyrus conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, like we said.
Right.
Then, just a year later, he issues this decree, allows the exiled Jews to go back.
Back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple.
Exactly. And this isn't just a story in the Bible.
No,
it's backed up by things like the Cyrus cylinder.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that. It's in the British Museum.
That's the one. It confirms his policy, letting exiled peoples return, restore their temples.
Wow. So the claim is, named person, specific actions predicted over a century before he lived. And it happened.
That's the argument presented in the sources, yeah. It's a key example for those who see fulfilled prophecy here.
Okay, moving on. Prophecy number 4. Alexander the Great. This one's from Daniel.
Correct. Book of Daniel, likely written somewhere between the 6th and maybe 5th centuries BCE, though dating Daniel is debated. It uses some vivid imagery.
A goat.
A male goat from the west representing Greece, with a notable horn that's Alexander, the first king.
Right.
The prophecy says this goat conquers swiftly, but then the bighorn breaks off.
At its peak.
Exactly. and 4 other horns come up instead, dividing the kingdom.
And historically, Alexander's conquests were super fast, right?
Very fast, yeah. Late 4th century BCE. But then he dies suddenly, 323 BCE, right at the height of his power.
In his empire.
It was divided among his 4 top generals, the Diadochi.
So 4 horns replacing the one big horn.
Precisely the imagery Daniel used centuries earlier, according to the traditional view.
The sources might mention Josephus, too, the historian.
It might, yeah. Flavius Josephus wrote that Alexander was shown these prophecies when he got to Jerusalem.
And he was impressed.
Supposedly, yes.
Yeah.
Spared the city, offered sacrifices. Of course, skeptics argue Daniel was written after these events.
But the counter-argument points to
early dating of the text and these historical accounts like Josephus. It's a point of contention.
Okay. Let's shift gears slightly. Timing. A prophecy about when the Messiah would arrive. Also Daniel.
Yes, Daniel again. This one involves calculating a specific number of years. 483 years. It comes from a passage about 7 weeks and 62 weeks.
Which is 69 weeks total.
Right. And the key interpretation, as the sources likely explain, is the day-year principle in prophecy. 1 day equals 1 year.
So 69 weeks times 7 days, or years, equals 483 years.
Exactly. 483 years, starting from the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah Prince.
Okay, so when was that decree?
The decree of Artaxerxes asserted to Nehemiah, generally dated around 457 BCE.
And if you count 483 years from 457 BCE, remembering there's no year 0.
You land around 27 CE.
27 CE. And the argument for fulfillment
is that Jesus of Nazareth was baptized and started his public ministry right around 27 CE.
The sources might also say there was a general expectation around then for a Messiah.
Yes, that's often highlighted. A sense of anticipation in Judea during that period.
So, while obviously not everyone accepted Jesus as the Messiah,
his appearance as this major figure, right in that time frame and place predicted by Daniel, is presented as, well, significant.
Okay. Now, a prophecy from Jesus himself about the temple's destruction.
Indeed. He's quoted giving some pretty specific warnings about Jerusalem and the temple.
Saying things like, when you see the abomination of desolation.
Spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
And also, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies.
Then know that its desolation has come. Flee to the mountains. Very direct instructions.
And the historical context for this.
The Jewish revolt against Rome started 66 CE. Led to the Romans besieging Jerusalem.
And the fulfillment argument centers on 70 CE.
Exactly, 70 CE. The Roman general Titus sacks Jerusalem, destroys the city and the temple.
The sources probably bring up Josephus again here.
Very likely. He documented it firsthand. Horrific stuff. Over 1 million deaths, total devastation. The temple burned, dismantled.
Just as Jesus had supposedly predicted.
That's the claim. And furthermore, early church historians, like Eusebius,
what did he say?
He recorded that the Christians, remembering Jesus' warning about the armies, actually did flee. Before the final siege, they went to Pella.
They got out in time.
That's the account. Some sources might even link this to the Dead Sea Scrolls discovery found in caves, where some groups, potentially including early Jewish followers of Jesus, hid after fleeing.
Interesting connection. Okay, one more. The 7th prophecy in the sources, Israel coming back together, regaining Jerusalem.
Yes, this connects to the previous one about the scattering, the diaspora.
Right. Jesus said they'd be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem would be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles.
Until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled.
So the idea is after centuries scattered, they'd return and get Jerusalem back.
Return to the land, establish a nation, and eventually regain control of Jerusalem, ending that period of Gentile rule over the city.
And this ties back to Daniel again.
It does. Daniel had another prophecy, received around 334 BCE, according to the sources, about the sanctuary being restored after 2,300 evenings and mornings.
Which, using that day year thing again,
is 2,300 years.
Okay, so counting 2,300 years from Daniel's time, 334 BCE, where does that land us?
Do the math. Account for no year 0. It takes you to about 1967 CE.
1967. Wow. And what happened in 1967?
The 6-Day War.
And Israel gained control of.
All of Jerusalem. Remember, the State of Israel was founded in 1948, but Jerusalem was divided.
Right. Jordan controlled the old city.
Until 1967, then Israel took control of the whole city.
The sources even mention someone predicting that date.
Yeah, a theologian named Alba Hufer. Apparently, in a book from 1960, he predicted Israel would gain Jerusalem in 1967. Based on interpreting Daniel.
That's recent history, a prediction made just a few years before the event.
which is why it's often presented as a prophecy fulfilled within the lifetime of many people today.
Okay, so we've really taken a deep dive here. 7 prophecies, exploring the arguments and the history presented in your sources.
From the Bible's own survival to Babylon, Cyrus, Alexander.
The timing of the Messiah, the temple's fall, and then the modern return to Jerusalem. It covers a huge sweep of history.
It really does. And just to reiterate, we've been looking at the claims and the historical accounts as presented in the material provided.
Absolutely. It's up to everyone listening to, dig deeper themselves, consider these arguments, look at different perspectives.
For sure. Explore the interpretations, the counter-arguments, all of it.
But it certainly makes you think, doesn't it? Whatever your personal beliefs are.
Yeah.
What does it mean if history lines up, even arguably, with such specific ancient texts? Does it change how we see history? Or faith? Or even time itself?
Definitely some profound questions to ponder.
Yeah. Something to keep exploring on your own, a fascinating topic.